RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
Welcome to Indianapolis This Week. I'm Katie Hines. Votes to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act and impose new sanctions on North Korea kept a busy week in Washington. President Trump claims wins in Congress, though it remains to be seen whether they will be long-term victories. But we begin today with a conversation you will only see right here on RTV6. A widely respected voice on foreign policy, former U.S. Senator Richard Lugar. What do you think President Trump's actions say about the U.S.'s power and his grasp of it?
Well, I think the president observes that we are a very powerful nation, but at the same time, as I've indicated before, his knowledge about world conditions. This includes our alliances, specific problems in various countries that are important to us, the problems that we're going to have with various types of action. This type of experience might have come if the president had served in the cabinet or as a senator or a member of the House of Representatives or an ambassador or some other position which led him to be a part of intelligence briefings, a part of the general buildup of knowledge that someone who has the authority our president would normally have. So the president is probably learning quickly, but at the same time, he has personal characteristics that are just a part of the way that he likes to express things that are upsetting to many Americans and many people around the world. For instance, he does not appear to be in favor of world trade. He does not favor, really, of immigration policies that would be favorable to the United States generally. He keeps talking about such things as a wall between Mexico and the United States, and thus subordinates the NAFTA treaty, which has Canada, Mexico, and the United States. A remarkable treaty, I believe, over the course of time, subjugates that to a lot of problems. In essence, he may change his mind, as he has on many other occasions, but for the time being, this creates some anxiety in our country as well as countries around the world.
Should people in Indiana be concerned about the recent aggression from North Korea?
Of course we should be concerned about North Korea. North Korea has been building potential nuclear weapons now for some years. Now they started fairly modestly, but now things are moving more rapidly in terms of the testing that they're doing in the area. Sometimes they're shooting missiles out to sea toward Japan, trying to develop really a submarine-based missile situation. Worse still, we believe that they are attempting to get some missiles that would have fine tips at the end in which there would be nuclear material, enough really to cause extraordinary damage wherever they might hit, in nearby South Korea or Japan, or worse still, in the United States. We have a problem here in terms of trying to find the Chinese, quite apart from the South Koreans and the Japanese and others, to work with us and to find at least some reason why the North Koreans would change the intent and the thrust of their program. And it's not clear at this point that we have found that.
What's at stake?
Well, what's at stake depends upon whether the North Koreans stop building and stop testing. Now, in the case, for instance, of Iran, the international community did negotiate a halt, essentially, to their nuclear program for a 10-year period of time, maybe for 15 years under some circumstances. But in the group that negotiated with Iran were Russia, China, Great Britain, France, and the United States. In other words, all of these countries. We've not yet been able to formulate a group like that to deal with the North Korean situation. Now, likewise, in the case of Iran, they were hurting from a good number of situations already in their economy, because we had put sanctions, and so had some other countries, on their exports and imports and their banking and what have you. When the sanctions were lifted, life was much better for the ordinary Iranian, although some observers are not certain how much better, but still, it was a relief. Now, in the case of North Korea, there have been many sanctions by the United States and some other countries, but this does not seem to have had the same effect upon the leadership. In other words, the North Korean leadership may be perfectly willing to let some people starve or to have great privation while it tries to keep its own power structure, its own regime.
And our thanks to Senator Lugar for his time. You can watch our full interview with the former chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That is available right now on the RTV6 app and at theindychannel.com. Next on Indianapolis this week, the flurry of activity in the nation's capital on the budget, religious liberty, and how the third time's the charm for Republicans when it comes to two legislative wins for President Trump this week, though it remains to be seen whether they end up as long-term victories. A major turnaround for the disappointing losses for Republicans, especially when it comes to health care. After two failed attempts, House Republicans narrowly pass a contentious bill they say will be the first step to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. It didn't happen without a number of last-minute amendments, add-ons, and changes to secure the votes of both conservative and moderate Republicans. In all, 20 Republicans still voted against the bill, along with all of the Democrats in the House. Though they don't think it was perfect, members of the GOP say it is time to move forward.
You know, it's race month in Indiana, and I want to remind my colleagues that as exciting as today is, today's vote's a green flag, not a checkered flag. It's the beginning of the race, not the end. Today, the House will vote to move legislation forward that will repeal Obamacare and replace it with something far better.
The House vote is split down along party lines among Indiana's congressional delegation. All 7 Republicans in the House voting for the bill, the 2 Democrats voting against it. The measure faces an even more uncertain future in the Senate, with significant changes expected. Indiana's Democratic senator calls it a disaster.
They are going to remove pre-existing conditions, place it with the states. Premiums can go through the roof and skyrocket. There'll be a minimum amount of funds there to try to reduce that, but it will not in any way, shape, or form be anything close to where we are with pre-existing conditions, diabetes, cancer, multiple sclerosis. This piece of legislation, in effect, puts individuals struggling with those challenges back out on their own again.
The other legislative victory for the Trump administration, a bipartisan budget deal passed by Congress and signed by the president. It funds the federal government through September. Both sides are claiming victory. Conservatives are touting a boost in military spending, and some Republicans are praising increases in funding for science and health research, even though Trump tried to slash those funds in his original budget blueprint.
It makes sure that the NIH, the National Institute of Health, is properly funded, because if we increase funding for those scientists and for their projects across the country, we can hopefully come up with some life-saving cures for many, many diseases.
Democrats claim victory in the budget deal. Federal funding for Planned Parenthood is not eliminated, and the budget does not include any money for Trump's proposed border wall with Mexico. Also this week, the president signs an executive order he says will give churches their voices back. The executive order on religious liberty eases restrictions for tax-exempt religious organizations to engage in partisan politics without penalty. The LGBT community had expressed concern that Trump would sign an order that would open the door for businesses to discriminate against gays and same-sex couples on the basis of religious reasons. The order is more narrow. Several reports out of Washington say the man behind it is Indiana's former governor.
To reaffirm the vital role that institutions and people of faith play in our national life. Our president is a believer. He loves his family and he loves this country with an unshakable faith in God and the American people.
And we're joined now by our RTV6 political insiders, Abdul Hakim Shabazz and Laura Beck. Welcome in, you guys. What is the significance of the House vote on health care?
Well, I think it's interesting in the sense that, first of all, this is step one out of a three-step process. There's going to be some major changes in the Senate. And what I found interesting was how they just barely managed to get across the finish line, 217 to 213. I would not be doing victory laps in the White House Rose Garden as if you're signing civil rights legislation. I'd be, breathing a big giant sigh of relief, then heading to the other side of Capitol Hill and begin the negotiations right away.
You're just making me laugh. Actually, I agree with you on that. We'll walk arm off into the sunset.
Cinco de Mayo weekend. What do you expect?
You got it. You got it. I think that when you look at on the Democrat side of it, Democrats and many moderate Republicans, particularly those who voted against it, are justifiably very concerned because of what it does to pre-existing conditions, lifetime caps, and a whole host of other issues. The other thing from a political standpoint was it was not good optics that they were drinking beer in the Rose Garden, or reported to be, but that they voted on a piece of legislation that had not been scored by the Congressional Budget Office. And so Republicans in the Senate have made it very clear that they're not going to do that until that happens. But they've now tied themselves to health care, and these House Republicans now own this, and they own this bill that they passed out.
That being said, do you see this vote, this issue, playing into 2018, the elections, Indiana's U.S. Senate race, for example?
It could have some impact. I think it really is going to boil down to what does it look like after it is done in the Senate? What does the final product look like? What do they do with respect, like Laura said, with pre-existing conditions? What do you do about, some of those lifetime caps? I think the final Senate version will be what really matters. And if you look at U.S. Senator Joe Donnelly, I think Joe's done a very good job of triangulating himself on health care reform, saying, hey, let's keep the parts that work, let's get rid of the parts that don't, like, say, the medical device tax that was hurting Indiana's medical device employers. So I think a lot of it is really going to depend on what comes out of the Senate version.
Well, I think what comes out of the Senate version is important, but I also think what they passed this past week is also important as well. Look at somebody like Congresswoman Brooks. She is in a district that Democrats are doing better and better in. It's really the nexus for some of this Women for Change group, which is a bipartisan group of women who are really trying to push thoughtful, common sense solutions. That is an issue that people can really grab onto, especially when you look at Indiana is one of the top states for pre-existing conditions. So a host of medical issues can be considered pre-existing conditions. And if people start seeing that showing up in their health care bills and showing up in their paycheck, that's going to make a big difference to them.
Do you see a lot of changes coming after President Trump signed the executive order on religious liberty?
Not necessarily. And here's the thing. I think somebody needs to remind the president that executive orders are not the same thing as the law itself.
There's a lot of things people need to tell them about.
Yeah, and I find it somewhat annoying as an attorney with some of my Republican friends who are touting executive orders by the Trump administration when the other guy was doing, everybody was screaming bloody murder and the president trying to act like a king. Really, all that does is basically tell the IRS is that when religious not-for-profits and organizations may engage in a little bit of politics, to give them the most leeway humanly possible. The president does not have the authority to change the federal version of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which has been on the books since 1993. Do some religious groups have more leeway to speak out? Yeah, I would argue they always did, but this is not a law, this is an executive order.
Well, there's also too a number of religious organizations that don't want this type of legislation because they feel like it divides their flock, so to speak, when they are taking sides politically on divisive issues. So it's not surprising to see that former Governor Pence and the Vice President is really carrying the water for this.
But at least Mike Pence showed them how to do it right. It's like, okay, here, Donald.
Maybe they learned the first time around.
When you do religious freedom, hey, don't do that, don't do that, and definitely don't include that in there.
Yeah, maybe 2015 was a learning experience, so I think it remains to be seen.
Rickers, I know we saw Governor Holcomb sign the bill into law, what a lot of Republicans were calling a bill that would close the legal loophole. What do you make of this? What do you make of the conversation moving forward on the state's liquor laws?
Well, the one thing a lot of folks have to understand is that the governor of Indiana does not have what's called a mandatory veto power. In other words, he can't go through a bill and just cross out the parts that he disagrees with and then let's go forward. He has to take it all as it comes. And there were a lot of other alcohol measures that were attached to that Rickers bill that really had nothing to do with the whole cold beer. And there was actually really good public policy legislation. So when the governor signed it, he said, all right, guys, I will sign this, but we all understand going forward that we have to revamp and add common sense to Indiana's alcohol laws. When we saw people the last couple of weeks knocking each other over in a Marsh store, to buy Brass Monkey because Marsh can't sell liquor anymore because they don't have a pharmacy, I mean, that ought to tell you Indiana's alcohol laws are messed up.
You better not filibuster me. I think
almost out of time, so you get the last word.
Here's the thing. I think the Rickers case is a classic example of bad public policy, because if you are an entrepreneur, you're a homegrown business like Jay Ricker, and the Indiana General Assembly targets you, that is a sign that we really need to look at how we're even doing this type of public policy in a budget year. Yes, we need to rehab and look at our alcohol laws, but we have got to do something with the General Assembly and get them to stop targeting businesses like that.
Thank you both very much for your take.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And we're just 3 weeks away from the 101st running of the Indianapolis 500, but you don't have to wait that long to get in the spirit of the race. Next, how you can get in on the fun and get some big perks. Welcome back to Indianapolis this week. It's the month of May, and that means the countdown to the 101st running of the Indianapolis 500 is well underway. We're just 28 days from the big 500-mile race and 6 days away from the IndyCar Grand Prix. But you can get into the racing spirit all month long with several events Indianapolis Motor Speedway has put together. One thing is the new 500 Fashion Friday program, and there are big incentives for you to participate. Allison Melanchthon from Indianapolis Motor Speedway tells us how it works.
4 Fridays in May, we're asking people to wear racing-inspired attire, whether it's checks or black and white. And there's a couple ways you can participate in that. You can go downtown or to Speedway and get discounts at restaurants if you've got anything black and white or checked on. And then if you're competitive, you can also participate in our hashtag 500 Fridays, Fashion Fridays contest. And take your picture on Friday and whatever you've got on, send it in on social media. And we've got a celebrity judge panel. They'll pick winners. You can win race tickets, concert tickets, and all kinds of great things.
You can find the list of restaurants giving away perks for 500 Fashion Fridays on IMS.com, and those restaurants will have placards in their windows. 2 very important dates for you to remember. The IndyCar Grand Prix is Saturday, May 13th. The Indianapolis 500 is Sunday, May 28th. It's time for our weekly commentary segment, I Say, You Say, where we bring in a surprise guest to hear about whatever's on their mind. This Sunday, Scott Watson of Heartland Intervention is here to talk about a very important topic, that is addiction.
Growing up, there were several topics it wasn't cool to talk about. Religion, how you voted, sexual orientation, or how much somebody earned were always taboo. Davey was a guy that worked for my grandfather. He was inconsistent in attendance and behavior. Others talked about him, but the one time I asked, I was told, we don't talk about Davey. I learned at my grandpa's funeral that Davey was an alcoholic. Today, salaries are online, we have gay rights marches, religion and politics are common discussions. Yet in many circles, addiction is still taboo. We see headlines, witness more crime, we're overwhelmed by statistics. But every alcoholic or addict, just like Davey, is a son, a daughter, a wife, a husband, an employee, or a friend. Whether you're watching this in the city or the suburbs, at the country club or the mission, it's likely that you're within eyesight of a family that is impacted by substance abuse. Those families don't hold rallies, and often they won't reach out for help. Studies show that 80% of those who need addiction treatment will never get it. Yes, the problem is big. Certainly, addiction treatment is very expensive, and sadly, access to treatment remains an issue. But these pressing realities will never improve until it's okay for families to admit that there's a substance abuse problem and seek clinically appropriate treatment. Our governor, the former attorney general, the legislature, under the leadership of Senator Jim Merritt and others, have all helped to make it okay to talk about addiction and recovery. Many police departments and court systems have joined medical professionals, all of whom are committed to a solution. It's important now, and it's up to you. Addiction is a chronic, progressive, and treatable illness. For years, it wasn't okay to talk about addiction. Today it is. If someone you love struggles with substance use, encourage them to say those 3 tough words: I need help. For years, Central Indiana families have struggled. Now it's okay to recover.
Thank you, Scott. Now we want to hear what you say. Let us know what you think of Scott's commentary. Feel free to share anything on your mind about Indianapolis this week. You can reach us on Twitter, the RTV6 Facebook page, the app, or the Indy channel.
For 12 months. Click, call, or visit an Xfinity store today.
Well, we are following breaking news. A man shot and killed on Indianapolis's Near East Side. Good morning, Indiana's Nicole Griffin joins us live from the scene near 10th Street and Rural Street. Nicole, bring us up to speed.
Well, Lauren, we can confirm that a man was shot and killed. Police tell us that man was shot in the head, and his body is actually still laying in the alley here behind us. Investigators are here on scene. I'm going to step out of the way. They are combing through evidence and trying to collect evidence here on the scene. Here's what I can tell you. A shots fired call came in around 5:30 this morning. Police did not find the body at that time, but they do think the shooting is related to that call. A woman waiting for the bus then saw the man laying in the alley. Police have only been on scene here for about 30 minutes. There's still several questions. Neighbors did hear gunshots here in this area. We will keep you updated online and on air throughout the day.
Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. I'm Lauren Casey. It's time for the 6th, so let's take a look at what's happening in Indy this week. We'll get revved up for the Indy 500 by taking a look back at races of the past. The Irvington Branch Library is hosting an Indy 500 Film Festival. It all starts on Tuesday at 7 p.m. They will show the Golden Festival of Speed, highlighting A.J. Foyt's first Indy 500 victory. We can probably all admit to taking way too many pictures of our pets. I mean, just look at these adorable shots of my dog Molly. Well, on Friday, the Eiteljorg Museum, you can learn how to paint the perfect portrait of your furry friend. That class is $25. It all starts at 1 o'clock on Friday. Support local businesses, and Broad Ripple take a tour of the village with their spring art walk. That's on Friday at 5 o'clock. You can stop by a number of local galleries and boutiques for this fun event. Mother's Day is right around the corner, and you can do your part to help honor this local mother and many other moms battling cancer with a blood drive. You can donate blood in Whitestown at the Boys and Girls Club on Saturday. The drive runs from 9 o'clock until 2. Well, I have the perfect reason for you to grab some of your friends and head on out to Fountain Square in the Fletcher Place neighborhoods. This weekend, the Virginia Avenue Folk Festival is coming there, and it's bringing more than 100 different musical acts to a number of different stages. Start your engines this Saturday. The IndyCar Grand Prix takes over the Motor Speedway. On Friday, you can catch a red carpet screening at the Speedway of A Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And don't forget to tune into our Trackside 6 Grand Preview. That's Saturday at 1 o'clock for all your pre-race action. That's what's happening in Indy this week. Katie, back to you.
Lauren, thanks so much. And thank you for joining us for Indianapolis This Week. For our entire RTV6 team, have a great Sunday.